Okay, everybody, this is a small video for today. We have something that was published today in Real Clear Politics, which is a paper that, or at least an online aggregating website. They do a lot of poll aggregating, a lot of article aggregating, and it's a great place to find, articles from all over the political and even other topics, science, all sorts of things, sports. And they published this hilarious article called The Democratic Contract with America by Brian Dean Wright, and we'll talk a little more about him later. And you'll notice a lot of things are going to sound a little familiar with the Democratic Contract with America. By the way, YouTube bounced one of my videos yesterday. There's a video I'm going to have to refilm. You'll see which one. It's not going to be nearly as good as what was supposed to come through because I can't use any copyrighted material. It's really a drag that YouTube can just bounce me for using about 10 or 15 seconds of clip from Comedy Central and Netflix. But anyway, Democratic Contract with America, they want to basically piggyback off of the success of the Republicans in 1994. But the problem is that, unlike with the Republicans, a lot of these people are old and failed politicians, compared to the Republicans at least. They're old and failed, okay? It says, this past Sunday, media outlets released a slew of new polls showing President Trump's popularity continuing its downward slide, most especially among independents. But buried in one report was something jaw-dropping for Democrats. Pollsters revealed that if the 2016 presidential election were held today, voters wouldn't change their mind. Trump would still beat Hillary Clinton. For some in my Democratic Party, especially those in the resistance wing, this latest news is nothing short of a gut punch. After all, there's not a single arrow left in the party's quiver that we haven't slung at the Trump administration. Consider the efforts of data show that the media, okay, I don't know why he starts the sentence that way. Data show that the media have produced an avalanche of negative stories about Trump, both before and after the election, along with his family, cabinet choices, executive orders, and proposed legislation. Leaders in the Senate and House have launched a series of bipartisan investigations into Trump and his alleged collusion with Russia. Intelligence community, I don't know why he writes this way. Obviously, you'll see, I would have expected he had a better way to write this article, but you'll see what his background is. National security officials briefed a dossier of unverified allegations against Trump, knowing it would leak to the press. Later, unnamed officials shared classified intelligence with journalists to embarrass the new president. So he's admitting it. This Democrat is admitting that this was leaked to the press in order to embarrass Donald Trump. He says interest groups, Democratic lawyers have filed a lawsuit laying the groundwork for Trump's impeachment based on his tangled web of business interests. This is talking about the emoluments clause. Believe me, the emoluments clause is going to go nowhere. Okay, it's never been applied, so there's no precedent for it, and the Supreme Court would probably end up throwing it out. And it says grassroots organizers. Democrats have raised record funds, published how to protest guides, and recruited large numbers of 2018 congressional candidates. They've also organized marches of scientists and women as a political show of force. And then it says party leaders and intellectuals. The Democratic National Committee installed a new party chairman who claims that Trump didn't actually win the election. Meanwhile, leading party intellectuals have concluded that Trump won because of racial and gender something. Racial and gender something. Gee, I don't know why. Yeah, I guess he just had a sentence that he let fall off a cliff. So, and yet this so he's finished talking about their so-called efforts, which failed. And yet, despite this barrage, polls show that voters are still inclined to give Trump the presidency. How could this be? How is it possible that Trump, with his well-documented shortcomings and policy reversals, might still win a national election. Part of the answer is something Democrats have been reluctant to acknowledge. We ran a deeply flawed candidate in 2016. Fair or not, Clinton was weighted down with over 30 years of political baggage, scandals, and generally unlikable demeanor. 40 years. 40 years, because it stretches back to the 70s. But anyway, it says, separate polling bears this out. Trump actually loses to a generic unnamed Democrat, even though he continues to beat leaders like Clinton and Senator Elizabeth Warren. So is our path forward as simple as swapping out bad candidates like Clinton for good ones? Unfortunately, no. For years, the party has been losing power across the country. This has led to the fewest number of Democrats holding state legislatures, governorships, and federal officials since the 1920s. Simply put, we have become... So anyway, he says they've been disconnected with the people. They're the worst. They're the most disconnected of a party as has been since the Republicans in the 30s. Apparently, the Olive Garden wants to chip into this conversation. They can go to hell. In 1994, Republicans understood they had a serious problem that required a wholesale remaking of the party. Their answer was the Contract with America, which laid out a new Republican vision for the country. The result, they captured the House and Senate. It's time for Democrats to do the same. In the weeks after Trump's election, moderate Democrats and a few sensible Republicans came together to draft what we've called Our America's Oath. Similar to the Contract with America, the plan outlines 10 broad policy objectives that Democrats should use to rally the party and the nation. The plan includes focus on clean government. We must adopt a constitutional amendment adopting term limits and a lifetime ban on elected officials serving as lobbyists. I'm going to read this through and then I'm going to go through. Yeah, a lot of this might sound a little familiar. It says, 2, fair trade. Unions have long argued that shipping jobs abroad would ruin far too many families and communities. NAFTA and WTO must be renegotiated. Then it says, economic vitality. We support rebuilding America's infrastructure to facilitate job growth and protect the health of our people. Meanwhile, we must address the economic fallout of automation, robotics, and artificial intelligence. Then it says education. We staunchly support public education, but also believe in nonprofit charter schools where communities want them. Energy. The elites of both parties have shipped our children off to wars for oil. No more. It's time to rebuild our energy economy based on solar, wind, and natural gas. National security. Big corporations often chase profits at the expense. We embrace the goal of making countries democratic, but not by the barrel of a gun. Next, our fight against terrorism must address the radical Islamic ideology that pours from Saudi Arabia while emphasizing that most Muslims are peaceful. 7, corporate America. Big corporations often chase profits at the expense of the American worker. We will fight any efforts to roll back common sense rules to keep businesses honest. 8, environment. The Iroquois tribe had it right. Environment. Every decision should be based on how it might impact the well-being of 7 generations in the future. 9, social issues. The government doesn't belong in our bodies, our bedrooms, or our churches. So long as our choices don't require taxpayer resources, it's no one's business but our own. And 10, social safety net. We understand that the government can be a force for good if directed properly. Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and the Affordable Care Act are prime examples of that. Still, reforms are needed. So, after reading this, I kind of like showed too much there, but he goes and says, these principles are not exhaustive, but they reflect the core values of most Democrats and many Americans. Over the next 2 years, we propose that like-minded grassroots organizations work together to draft legislation to move these ideas forward and present them to our fellow citizens in a full court of public press. Will there be disagreement as we shape our American oath? You bet, but make no mistakes, we must move forward as quickly as possible. Otherwise, these most recent polls forecast a painful truth. No matter what Democrats throw his way, Trump's America will be the new America. And this guy's name, Brian Dean Wright, is a former covert CIA officer and member of the Democratic Party. Okay, so aside from the fact that this is basically Evan McMullen's clone, and I'll bring up his profile later. Basically, did you see anything familiar there after? Okay, so we're going to stop scrolling up, sorry. I know that my visuals aren't exactly great, but look at his plan. I counted when I read this earlier 5 points in the 10 points that are very familiar: clean government, the lobbyist ban and the term limits, the fair trade, getting rid of or renegotiating NAFTA and the WTO. Economic vitality is kind of that's a fuzzy area, so I'm not going to hammer him down on there. And education with the charter schools, and then natural gas and energy, and then acknowledging radical Islamic ideology that pours from Saudi Arabia. Anyway, of these, so let's see here. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 5 out of 10. Well, let's count number 3. So 6 out of 10 of these principles are actually picked out of the Donald Trump book. Okay, so what the Democrats are basically saying, if they're going to embrace this article, is that they support 60% of the Donald Trump agenda, or 60% of their agenda. Sorry, I misstated that. 60% of their agenda overlaps with Donald Trump's. Okay, they're basically saying, if you can't beat them, join them. Okay, they never proposed during the election. I think Bernie did mention something about this, but Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, between the two, only Trump proposed a ban on elected officials serving as lobbyists, and only Trump proposed term limits, and Rand Paul. Bernie Sanders, I'm not sure. I'd have to check on that. Fair trade, scrapping the TPP would probably be that, they're talking about NAFTA and the WTO. Those were Trump positions. Those were not at all Democrat positions during the 2016 election. Those were Donald Trump positions. They weren't even Republican positions. So this isn't an issue of bipartisanship and the Democrats reaching across the aisle. This is the Democrats. If they were to adopt these policies, the easiest thing they could do to promote them would be to vote for policy proposals, the legislative agenda of Donald Trump if they wanted to. They could do it. If this was really a serious document, and I don't believe, I'm going to have to research this organization, Our American Oath or whatever it is. I don't believe it's really a priority. The economic vitality, I'm not sure if that's really something we can, dissect. He doesn't say anything here at all, except for rebuilding America's infrastructure. Yeah, that's from the Democratic platform, but it's also from the Donald Trump platform. He's also proposing a lot of infrastructure spending. So it's basically, yes, it's still an overlap. Okay, it doesn't matter if you're saying, we the Democrats also were in favor of it, just like both Hillary and Bernie Sanders were in favor of it. So was Donald Trump. This is basically saying the Democrats are moving towards this agenda. Number 4, education. We also believe in nonprofit charter schools where communities want them. Well, they want them everywhere. Okay, sorry, Olive Garden again. Let's see if I can get that out of the frame. So basically, they're embracing part of the education agenda. They're not as much in favor of charter schools as the Republicans are, but they're at least admitting that they're necessary. This is, on the surface and below the surface, this is embracing the agenda of the Republicans, in fact, and Donald Trump, both of them. It's both. So then number 6, with energy, I already explained. It's natural gas. That means basically, in many cases, fracking. And he in fact, he makes it a point not to say the word fracking in this article, not to write the word fracking, interestingly enough. And then he, of course, admits that it's radical Islamic ideology. That's something that the Trump campaign and others were calling on the Democrats to admit the entire campaign, and they wouldn't do it. So basically, they're admitting something that the Republicans have been demanding that they say for the past few years. Okay, so there's nothing that it is now on the table. The Democrats are now saying on the table, if this proposal is actually serious. I'm not saying that it's a serious proposal, because we don't know who's supporting this. We don't know if there's any people at the top. Okay? So that's another one where they're caving in. And then the rest of them, they're not really, they're classic Democrat positions, Medicaid, Social Security, Medicare, Affordable Care Act, whatever. Reforms are needed. Reforms are needed is the vaguest piece of bullshit there is. This entire thing, there's two different things here, okay? This so-called Democrat New Path guy, the Oath, Our American Oath, or whatever it is, OAO, what they're doing is they're proposing two different tracks. 4 of these tracks are the same Democratic platitudes, and 6 of them are borrowing Donald Trump policies. So if you're a progressive out there, if you're a Democrat, a classic Democrat, one of these idiots that works at the library that that they drive a Prius, okay? I'm trying to speak to you as respectfully as I can, which is probably I'm already failing. This is a betrayal of your values, basically. They're basically saying we have to move our party, this movement at least, is saying we have to move our party to the right, all the way to the right, that it's almost a moderate Democrat version. They're basically the blue dog Democrats, okay? This is the blue dog Democrats. If this proposal goes anywhere, will be revived as a group, and they will have zero chance of making a change because if you're a progressive, let me tell you what's the score. In any of these areas where the Democrats have, penetration in the rural areas, they were decimated under Barack Obama. What this guy's proposing is that they rebuild the conservative wing of the Democratic Party. Now, to me, I think that's kind of a strange proposal because it's not really conservative in a global sense. And, we talk a lot about in physics and analytical mathematics, there's global variables and then there's local variables. Well, on the local level, within the Democratic Party, by local variables, this would be a conservative group. In the global sense, it's still moderate liberals. Okay, it's very moderate liberals. So, but in the sense of progressives, it would be a step backwards. And it would bring the Democratic Party, okay, it would bring them further to the right than, probably it would bring them to the right as much as they were under Bill Clinton after 1994. After 1994, and I'm going to talk about this probably next week in a different video on a book for the Bill and Hillary Clinton Presidential Penitentiary Library. I'm going to be talking about how Bill Clinton did embrace the centrist position, and when I say centrist, it's definitely not what Democrats have been working for since the 60s. It's probably it's not even what Republicans are working for. It's literally something in the middle. It has nothing to do with either party. It was a successful strategy, by the way. I'm not criticizing him for it. And I think it was actually kind of a smart strategy if you think about it. And for him, it was a major point of personal success. Personal success for a lot of Americans. I don't think it's success for progressive Americans. So what do you think? I think this is going to be a failure today because the Democrats who are in control, the Democrats who rule the party, Pelosi, Schumer, you could talk about Elizabeth Warren, who's mentioned here as unpopular. You could talk about any of these long-term establishment Democrats, even some of the kind of younger ones like Cory Booker. All of them are not cut. Well, actually, Cory Booker could pull this off, but a lot of the other ones would be, inadequate for it. They don't have the real credential. First of all, they've been calling for the opposite for years. They've been saying for years that this is wrong, and we can't call out Islamic ideology. That would be racist, and charter schools ruin public schools, and that NAFTA helped create American jobs and not destroy them, and that term limits would limit the freedom of expression of legislators and put them at a disadvantage to the president, things like that. So that's it. How do you like it? Your Democratic Party would be the OAO, basically means cloning the moderate Republican wing and basically merging them together or reviving the blue dog wing of the Democratic Party, which is not really a factor anymore, even though there's a few stragglers left. So let me know what you think. I will, yeah, you know, maybe next week I'll talk a little more about the blue dogs instead of now. I don't really have that much time. Have a great weekend. I'll probably be back making videos tomorrow night, which will probably publish Sunday, and this video will probably publish on Saturday night. So have a great weekend. This is Ramon, Bold Like a Leopard, and remember those people that are propping up Obamacare, these Republican turncoats. Good night.